The Louie T Network is powered by MusicHead University. MusicHeads, classes in session. Turn me up. Enroll on YouTube now. Link is in the description.
Who else could it be but me, your man, Louie T? Welcome to the Command Post Live. You know what it is. Post up. Take command. I, of course, am your Commander-in-Chief, Louie T. Thank you guys for joining me. All right, so number of topics to get to tonight. I put up my final 53-man roster projections earlier. So if you haven't had a chance to take a look at that, take a look at that. I don't really want to spend too much time on that particular item because I put that video out for that purpose so that we could just assume that you watched that already, kind of talk about some of the decisions that I made, why I made them, and then talk about have some of the guys done enough to make this roster. I think some of the things that Dan Quinn said after the game kind of put everything in its proper perspective. So we're going to talk about some of the things Quinn said after the game. Josh Harris spoke, majority owner of this team, yesterday. So I want to kind of go through what he said. Not really a lot to, glean from that, press conference. But there were some things that, he reiterated, things that he said in the past, and that he kind of hammered those things home once again. So I'll talk about a few things that he said during that press conference. I told you guys, keep your ears to the street, eyes wide open. They're going to be cuts being made. I'm actually shocked. The Commanders are one of 3 teams that have not cut a single player today. Very shocking, first and foremost. I get that Washington had a game late last night along with the Patriots. So they were among the last to get to this process. So while I understand that, and there were teams that played on, Thursday and Friday of last week. So they had plenty of time to assess their rosters and start trimming off some of the fat. Whereas Washington, their last preseason game wasn't until last night and didn't complete until after 11 on the East Coast. So they kind of wanted to settle in, not be hasty in some of the decisions that they were making. But there's some guys that they know they're going to cut. I just expected them to, and being that it wasn't a road game, it was a home game. So it's not like, I just expected them to make some decisions today, but they didn't. And that's fine. They've got to trim the roster down like everyone else does. By 4 p.m. tomorrow on the East Coast to 53, and they'll do that. But some of the teams have started their process, so there are names that are already out there. I talked about some of those on the podcast earlier. I'll rehash that for those of you who missed that. But there's one name in particular that I brought up last night, and now his name is starting to really percolate league circles, and we'll see if a team is desperate enough to trade for him. We'll talk about him and his situation and what I'd be willing to do, and also wanting to see what you guys would be willing to do. So in any event, let's talk about the roster quickly, and then we'll get to some of these press conferences, and then ultimately take a look at some of the guys that have been released and what that could potentially mean for the Commanders. So my 53-man roster, I put that out earlier today, did a stream for Bleacher Report, and then I just threw it up here on my channel. And I'll be on Bleacher Report again tomorrow. Soon as 4 o'clock hits, that deadline comes and goes. I think we'll probably have the Commanders' full roster, the 53-man roster that they've decided on, before 4 o'clock. It won't be like 3:59 and they still haven't put out all the names. We'll have everything probably by like 3:30-ish or so, if not before then. But keep in mind, and I made sure I said this at the top of the final projection video that I put out, it's not final. It may be the 53 that they go with to meet the deadline requirement, but be sure to know that they're going to look to upgrade this roster in any way, shape, or form via the waiver wire, trade, any other ways that they can, maneuver. Like even within our own roster, there are guys like I don't know if you guys saw this or not, but Ben Standing put out a post on X. I want to say it was yesterday. If it wasn't yesterday, it was the day before yesterday. Not too long after the whole Jahan Dotson situation. I want to say it was yesterday. And he spoke about redundancies on the roster that the Commanders were exploring options to take care of. This was non-Jahan Dotson related because while we have guys that do similar things at receiver, I don't look at it as like straight redundancy. Whereas at defensive tackle, maybe there are some redundancies there, right? I don't think Ridgeway and Mathis are the same player, but they kind of do the same thing, right? Neither of them are going to be elite at getting to the quarterback. Both are supposed to be really good at stopping the run, but they do it in different ways, to me at least. Ridgeway is more of a brute power force type of guy, whereas Mathis is more of, a big guy that can be physical, but he wants to use quickness. We saw that in the preseason. So I don't know if that's a redundancy there, but there have been conversations surrounding defensive tackle and safety in particular in terms of positions that offer redundancy on the roster, and that Washington would be really open to moving, some of those players via trade if at all possible. So again, I said this to you guys 2-3 days ago. If you're willing to trade someone, it means you're willing to cut them, right? If you value a player and you feel like he can help you, you're not even entertaining the thought of trading him. Okay. Like when Dan Quinn said, we saw an opportunity to improve our, roster and our organization. So we took it. You're not taking that same opportunity for Terry McLaurin because you value him. You value what he brings to the table. You're not even entertaining offers to trade him because you value what he brings to your football team and what he can do in terms of wins and losses for you. So it'll be interesting to see if there are more trades from the Commander side of things because, they want more picks, not less. So I don't see them dishing out any more picks, especially when you're sitting at number 2 on the waiver wire. You're not going to be, it's different if you're sitting at 8 or 9 and there's a guy you really like and you got to wait for him to pass through 7 or 8 teams to get to you. Yeah, okay, I get it. The only reason, and I said this earlier, the only reason they traded for a place kicker in Cade York is because they wanted him to kick in the final preseason game. So they needed to get him here sooner rather than later because you can't replicate game snaps and game opportunities. You can try to replicate that all you want in joint practices, in practice itself. It's still practice. I don't care if you put a shot clock up. I don't care if you simulate crowd noise. I don't care if you have the players on the sidelines going nuts and you say, hey, you make this kick, practice is over. You miss this kick, we practice for another 30 minutes. So you run wind sprints or trying to put extra pressure on the kick. It doesn't matter. It's not the game. A game is different than practice. So they wanted to get him in here. And that's why they were willing to part ways with a conditional 7th round pick, right? But I don't see them being willing to part ways with any draft capital to acquire a player unless that player in their minds has no business being available and they're seeing it as a steal. Like we're getting a deal here. That's how I shop. I shop looking for deals. If I don't feel like I'm getting a deal, I'm not making the purchase unless I truly want this item. And there are not many things that I want at this age that I want that I have to have and I'm willing to pay full price for. And that's kind of where I think the Commanders are right now. Don't really know if I want him that bad that I'm willing to give you a pick. How about I just roll the dice, see what happens when you cut him. And if the Panthers don't want him and I do, then he's coming to Washington. If the Panthers want him, then try my luck next time, right? So I think I committed everything to memory, so we can go through it real quick. But first things first. No real surprises. There were a few changes since the last time that I did it. I was actually looking at the last one that I did to see how many changes actually took place from the first time that I did it. And there weren't very many. Obviously, safety has changed drastically. I only had 5 safeties the first time. I had 7 this time. I had 6 linebackers. That was trimmed down to 5. I had 3 running backs, but not the same 3. I had Chris Rodriguez Jr. the first time I did it. He's no longer on the list. So let's go through the positions real quick. Quarterback 2, same 2. JD5 and Mariota. That's a no-brainer. Running back, still 3. I don't think this, I've said this many times, I don't think this is a roster that is worthy of 4 backs. You pick the 3 best backs out of the 5 that you've been giving run to, and you move forward. I think it's going to be Jeremy McNichols. Unfortunately, I'm a Michael Wiley guy, but I think Michael Wiley will be back on the practice squad, and he won't be that far away from being back on this roster. But I could be wrong, and I said this on my video that I could have misread the playing time that they divvied up in the game. Normally, when they don't play a guy that they like, it's because they're trying to hide him, because they want to cut him, get him on the practice squad. It could be that they already know what they have in Wiley, and they wanted to give Jeremy McNichols and especially Chris Rodriguez Jr. an opportunity to showcase their skills to the rest of the league, because they're going to cut both of those dudes and keep Michael Wiley. That could be it too. I don't see that being the case. I think it's Jeremy McNichols because of his special teams prowess. DQ already told us that special teams ranks pretty high. It's at the top of the pile when it comes to guys that aren't starters and are going to contribute. Special teams ability is at the top of the pile, because where will Jeremy McNichols most likely make an impact on this team this upcoming season? It won't be at running back. It'll be on special teams. So that's why it's so important. That kind of shaped and molded my decision-making process as we continue through. Wide receivers, I kept 5. That can easily be rearranged to 6. It was 6 initially, right? As a matter of fact, it was 5 initially because I had 23 offensive players. And then when I was done with the defense, I had 25 on defense. So I had to come back and add 2 more offensive players because I still had 2 roster spots available, which tells you the state of our roster when I finish and I have spots available and I have to go back and add guys to the roster just to fill out the roster. That tells you that we just don't have enough talent, here. It should never be a case where you go back and you go, oh, damn, I got 2 roster spots left. Let me see what I need to do with these. I should be like, damn, I got 2 extra dudes and I got to trim off fat somewhere to make them fit. That wasn't the case. So I started out with 25 on defense, 23 on offense. And then I thought about something, went back and added a 26th defender. And that allowed me to have to, add 1 more offensive player. I had Martavis Bryant initially, but I took him off when I went from 5 to 6 and then back down to 5. So Terry McLaurin, De'Ami Brown, Olamide Zaccheaus, Luke McCaffrey, and Byron Pringle are my 5 receivers. Could there be a 6th? Absolutely. And I wouldn't be shocked if there is. In my mind's eye, it doesn't matter 5 or 6, because if it's 6, that guy isn't safe. If you get what I'm saying. And I'll explain further. But that's the reason why when I had to get rid of someone, the first person to go was that 6th receiver, because that receiver to me isn't safe regardless. I went to tight end. I had trimmed it down to 3. Then I had to add someone back. And it was between Martavis Bryant and Cole Turner. I added Turner. Why did I add Cole Turner? So again, the 4 tight ends. All right. The 3 that are definitely here: Zach Ertz, John Bates, Ben Sinnott, and then the 4th is Cole Turner. I added Turner because Turner is what you call a core 4 specialists. He's on all 4 special teams units. And DQ literally told us a week ago that guys with that tight end / safety body type that are good in space with movement skills are going to be vital to the returns game this year in particular, and how you utilize them on special teams. And it just got me to thinking about all those safeties and how they can be valuable and useful, all the tight ends. And we run a lot of 2 tight end sets. We run some 3 tight end sets at times, especially when you get into goal line. And Cole Turner's, you use tight ends a ton on special teams, and Turner's on all 4. So he's more valuable right now to the operation of special teams than, say, a Martavis Bryant is, who right now is only useful on offense and probably only in the red zone or running a go ball. Like, he has a very specific skill set, and right now, because he doesn't have the full grasp of the playbook, there's only so much you can do with him, right? Which is why I think he ultimately lands on the practice squad. We'll come back to him because Dan Quinn talked about him quite a bit during his post-game presser. And I thought there were some interesting comments that led me to believe that Dan Quinn did a good job of not getting swept up in the moment, although he felt really good for Martavis Bryant. And I had to make sure that I wasn't a prisoner of the moment either. You went to the offensive line. And let me just say this about Cole Turner too. If they need a roster spot because they found someone on the waiver wire that they're putting in a claim for and they ultimately are awarded that player, Cole Turner is going to be one of the first guys to go, right? So they're going to be 2 or 3 roster spots that are easily like, hey, okay, we found a guy here on waivers. We're going to put in a claim. And if they're awarded that guy, Cole Turner's gone, or this player's gone, or that player's gone. Like, there are 3 or 4 spots you can go straight to and say, okay, got us a guy. We need you to go to the practice squad, right? Cole Turner is almost at the top of that list. So, so then you go to the offensive line. This has been shuffled a bit since the first list that I put out. Mason Brooks has been released. And I don't think Trenton Scott is on this team. Now, there was something interesting DQ said after the game, which was if you didn't play, you were pretty much safe. It's not 100% guaranteed, but he said you're barking up the right tree if you're assuming that a guy that's healthy who didn't play is safe on the roster. You're barking up the right tree, he said. So I'm thinking about a Trenton Scott, and I'm like, well, his ass didn't play. That could mean he's safe, or that could mean that they didn't want to put him out there and they want to keep him on the practice squad. So they gave another guy an opportunity to play, to showcase his skills for the rest of the league in Armani Taylor Prelude, because they want to keep Trenton Scott on the practice squad. That's my thought process. I could be wrong about that, but the 10 offensive linemen I have from left to right are as follows: Brandon Coleman at left tackle, Nick Allegretti at left guard, Tyler Biotish at center, Sam Cosme at right guard, and Andrew Wiley at right tackle. Backing those guys up from left to right, Cornelius Lucas, who will be our primary swing tackle, but more so the left side because Chris Paul is right side only. Cornelius Lucas, Julian Good-Jones, Michael Dieter, Ricky Stromberg, Chris Paul. So those are your 10 offensive linemen. I think Trent Scott is the odd man out. I've always tied his roster spot to the health of Brandon Coleman. If Coleman's healthy, Trent Scott is he is expendable. If Coleman is not healthy, you need to keep Trenton Scott around. That's always been my philosophical approach towards the end of this process, once they started moving him around the guard and stuff like that. So that gives you 24 on the offensive side. Go to the defensive side. The defensive line is still the same for me. Your ends are Cleveland Farrell, Dorrance Armstrong Jr., Dante Fowler Jr., and KJ Henry. If they find another defensive end out there that they like, KJ Henry could be expendable, right? I still contend that when F.A. Obata is healthy, if they like what they see from him, KJ Henry, again, will be downgraded to the practice squad. It'll be interesting, though, because once you get to week 1, your contract is fully guaranteed. So teams are very, very hesitant to put veterans on the team that are making, solid, decent money, because you're on the hook for their entire salary once they're on the roster come week 1, which is why, Dan Quinn talked about it during his press conference. We'll talk more about that when we get there. But the 5 defensive tackles, Payne, Allen, Mathis, Ridgeway III, and Newton, right? Love that group. I hope they don't touch it. I've heard rumors that they may try to get rid of one of those defensive tackles. Again, I liken it to the same thing with Brandon Coleman. If Johnny Newton isn't 155% healthy, like, you have no issues, you have no worries, he's gonna, what you don't know, this man has had 2 procedures this offseason, and he's dealing with a soft tissue injury in the same general vicinity. I would just be more comfortable if you hung on to every single one of your defensive tackles there and not do anything, rash. Like, that's not a position you need to trim off fat to add somewhere else. There are other positions you can do that at. You can do that at safety. You can do that at linebacker. You can do it at tight end. You don't need to do it at defensive tackle. I just hope they don't do anything silly, right? So that's the defensive line, 9. Then you go to linebacker. It was 4. So this is what happened. It was 4. This is why I had 25, because it was just Bobby Wagner, Frankie Louvu, Jamin Davis, Michael Walker. But then I thought about something. And now I saw that there's a rule change that allows them to maybe finesse this. But in my mind, I thought, well, the meniscus procedure that Jordan McGee had done, the trimming of the disc and the reshaping of it, is a 4 to 6 week procedure in terms of recovery time. Game 1, September 8th, would be exactly a month from when he had the procedure performed. So theoretically speaking, he could be back by week 2 or 3 at the latest. If everything goes well, he heals properly, he's able to recover with no setbacks. You don't want to put him on IR or the PUP list, because he'd be missing at a bare minimum the first 4 games of the season. Now, you could do that, and he won't count against the 53-man roster. But in my mind, I said he's probably going to be on the 53-man roster. It gives you sort of a buffer. You put him on the 53, right? Because you don't have to remove him now. You don't have any reason to. But if you go out and you put in a waiver claim for someone and you're awarded that player, Jordan McGee can now be put on, IR and miss the first 4 weeks. He'll get a chance to fully, get healthy, get ramped back up to speed, and you don't have to rush the process, right? Whereas if you're reserving a roster spot for him, you're going to want to get him out here as soon as possible. So I think he's another guy. Cole Turner's another guy, and then we'll get to the safeties here in a bit. So I put him on the roster, but he's merely holding on to a space, because if they need it, they can easily go and say, all right, you're on IR for the first 4 weeks, short-term IR. You're out of here for the first 4 weeks. And then when you're ready, we'll remove a guy off the roster and bring you up, right? Same thing I think they're going to do with F.A. Obata when he's ready to go. So 5 linebackers if you add in Jordan McGee, which I did. Then you get to the corners. They've been the same 5 the entire time. I don't think it's changing. It's the 3 outside corners, Emmanuel Forbes Jr., Benjamin St. Juste, and Michael Davis. And then the 2 slot or nickels, Mike Sainristil and Noah Igbenogany. Now, Sainristil's ability to play inside and out gives you the flexibility to not need a 6th corner, right? If anything happens, he can kick outside, no Igbenogany can go inside, and you're still good. So you're good with these 5 guys right here. Now, how well they're going to perform, I don't know. But from a roster standpoint, you don't need to do anything else. And none of the other corners played well enough to force you to need to do something that, to me, would be unnecessary, right? Similar to what I said about running back. There's just not enough talent there. There's not enough talent at corner to force you to have to add another guy onto the roster. You know, Chig Anusium can go on the practice squad. If you like the Penn State kid, put him on the practice squad. You want to keep working with him, knock yourself out. All right. So 5 there. And then I lost my mind, and I had 7 safeties on the 53-man roster. Now, hear me out. I went from this hard line stance of 5 to 7, which is just insane. However, in my mind, so let me give you the 7. You know the 7, but I'll give them to you anyway. So Quan Martin, Jeremy Chin, Percy Butler, Jeremy Reeves, Derek Forrest, Dominique Hampton, Tyler Owens. Now, same thing applies to the safety position that applied to the tight ends. And then it goes a step further, which is why 7 isn't crazy. It is, but it's not far-fetched when you look at it from this lens and this prism that I'm about to describe to you. So 1, like I mentioned with the tight ends, the versatility of that particular position and that body type for special teams, specifically with the dynamic kickoff and all the things that they'll be trying to implement. I think that type of body type, and Dan Quinn talked about it, is going to be one that teams really look to use and implement when thinking about special teams and maybe even, drafting their roster. So that's something that's not lost on me. 2, with this particular scheme with Dan Quinn and Joe Witt Jr., they cross-train a lot of their safeties to be able to play linebacker because they like that speed and athleticism. And so you can maybe take away from linebacker a little bit because you're going to have these safeties playing, a little bit of both of these. Like Jeremy Chin, for instance, he's going to be playing a lot down in the box. So, yes, he's a safety, but he's also going to be playing a ton of backer because he's going to be in the box a ton. And so that's something else to take into consideration. And then, much like I said with Cole Turner and Jordan McGee in particular, and maybe KJ Henry to a lesser degree, if you need a roster spot and you keep 7 safeties, where's the first place you're going if you need to remove someone from the 53-man roster to add a guy that you put in a waiver claim for and was awarded? Go straight to the 7 safeties, right? If you need to move, and then I think when you get inside of the 7 safeties, there are 3 guys that you have to have a real discussion about. First guy is Tyler Owens, because you look at him and you say, undrafted, rest of the league said no on him. While he was good and he stood out for us in the preseason, he didn't have 3 pick sixes in the preseason. Like, no one else knows what Tyler Owens was doing but us. So you can cut Tyler Owens and get him onto the practice squad successfully, and nothing's going to be, wrong there. But you also look at it from the perspective of, you signed him to a deal. It's 4 years, relatively cheap. Meanwhile, Derek Forrest is on the last year of his rookie deal, going to cost you a little bit more to hold on to him. It's 1 year versus a guy of 4 years of service. You put the guy out there with 4 years of service out there on the market, and somebody could snatch him up. Meanwhile, if you lose Derek Forrest, it's just 1 year. You could care less, right? So that's something else to entertain. And then Dominique Hampton, while he hasn't shown us a ton in the preseason, and we haven't heard his name called a ton in training camp, they still drafted him. They still value his size and his versatility to be able to play both linebacker and safety. Remember, they were cross-training him at linebacker too. And again, 4 years of service on a very minimal deal. Remember, he's a 5th-round pick versus a guy that has 1 year left, and then the other guy you didn't draft at all. So there's a draftable grade more likely than not for Dominique Hampton out there for teams that may not have had a 5th round, or might have had a later 5th round grade on him, or said, hey, if this kid's still there, we're going to take him. Or, hey, if he's there in the 6th round, we'll take him. Now they get another shot at him, and you may not get him back. So either way, I think the two guys that are in the crosshairs, if they need roster flexibility and space, is Derek Forrest and Tyler Owens. Both of them could not make the team. In my mind, one of them probably won't ultimately be here. You can pick which one. It feels like Derek Forrest would be the odd man out here. But, I went with the safe approach, keeping all 7 of them for the time being. But again, they're mere placeholders. You put in waiver claims. We can go to safety. We can go to Cole Turner. We can go to Jordan McGee and say, hey, we're going to put you on IR. Like, there's so many different things you can do to free up the space you need to add in 2 or 3 or maybe even upwards of 4 guys that you put in waiver claims for. They're going to be active. I don't know how active. I don't know if I see 3 or 4 guys, but maybe 2 guys they put in waiver claims for. And you hope you get at least one of them, if not both of them, right? So we'll see what they decide to do ultimately, right? So, and then the 3 specialists, slam dunk, right? After going 4 for 4 on kicks last night, 2 for 2 in the field goal department, 2 for 2 on the extra points, it's pretty safe to say that they're not going to do anything else at kicker at this current juncture. So Cade York is going to be the kicker here. We know you got your punter in Tressway, and you've got your long snapper in Tyler Ott. So that, and then a lot of people were asking me, I didn't think this was a question that needed to be asked. I thought we had already solved this, but a lot of people asked me in the comment section after I posted my final 53-man roster projections. Well, who's returning punts? And I'm like, we talked about this after the first preseason game. Olamide Zaccheaus is your punt returner. He's had the biggest punt return of any of the return men back there to field punts the entire preseason. He returned 2 or 3 punts in the first preseason game versus the Jets, and he broke one for like 15 yards. No one's even come close to that, right? So I think he has the punt returning duties pretty much sewn up at this point, which is why, those of you who like, well, what about Jamison Crowder? What about him? What about him? I've said this all along. If Jamison Crowder, and I could be wrong about this, but I'm standing 10 toes down and I'm standing on business on what I said the entire time, which is if Jamison Crowder isn't your primary punt returner, then what purpose does Jamison Crowder really provide other than being able to help you as a veteran receiver? But you can put a veteran receiver on the practice squad. You do not have, and again, I just told you, they signed Jamison Crowder to real money, right? And we're going to go over that comment made by Dan Quinn, but they signed him to real money on that 1-year deal. So if I don't want his money fully guaranteed, which means I can get out of his contract at any point, I can't have him on the roster come week 1. Now, week 2, I can sign his ass right back here, and it'll be like nothing ever happened. But week 1, he can't be on the roster. And it's going to be a number of guys that they look at from that vein, from that prism, and say, nah, we can't put him on the roster because that's the difference between being on the hook for $2.5 million and just being on the hook for, a game check or a game, check here, game check there, practice squad money, whatever the case may be. So I think you're going to see them push the smaller salary guys onto the roster, which is what you do. And the guys that are making real money that are veterans, you got to go. Now, we can work something out after week 1, but you can't be on the roster opening day because if you are, your salary is fully guaranteed. All right. So speaking of that press conference with DQ, let's do that. Let's jump into some of these pressers real quick. So DQ's presser. This was post-game, by the way, from last night. He said, started the press conference with praise of Trace McSorley and Martavis Bryant. Their journeys, them just meeting each other a week ago and having that drive and, doing the things that they did to galvanize the team. McSorley with the truck stick of the DB, and then Martavis Bryant with the touchdown grab really got the sidelines fired up. So he talked about their journeys and how he really thought that was a cool moment. He talked about Martavis Bryant at least 3 times because it was easy to be, and I saw that, fans are very emotional, right? We can be emotional. Right? That's part of why we're fans. It's easy to get caught up in the moment. Bryant has a big, second half, which he did in that game. He literally took over the game. 2 pass interference penalties led to 10 points. And then, or I think it was 10 points. It might have been 14 points because I know the Wiley touchdown was off the back of his first pass interference penalty that he drew. And then the second pass interference penalty, I think that one ended up landing us a field goal, but it could have ended up getting us that last touchdown. But whatever the case may be, between the 2 pass interference penalties he drew, the 3 catches, including the touchdown catch, he was really big, right? So, Dan Quinn talked about how cool of a moment it was, how happy he is for him, and, understanding that this man could have given up on several occasions. Man's 32 years old, right? Like, how many guys who've been out of the league for 6 years that past the age of 30 ever get another opportunity to play in the NFL, right? Generally, there's a window there. Once you're out of the league for 2 or 3 years, it's over. Try 5 or 6 and then trying to come back. So it took a lot of mental gymnastics and intestinal fortitude to do what he did and be ready when the opportunity presented itself. Because at some point you go and you tell yourself, it's over, bro. Unless I want to play in one of these lesser leagues, keep playing football, the game I love, I'm not going to ever play it at the highest level again. But he stayed ready, and he praised him for the taking advantage of the opportunity. So then the question was posed: does a game like this, a performance like this, ultimately push a guy onto the roster? Speaking of Martavis Bryant, and I thought this was interesting from DQ, because DQ could have easily said these were the type of performances that we were looking for. We'll go back and assess everything and everyone, but this is what we were talking about when we were looking for guys to stand out. He didn't say that, right? He just pretty much said, hey, I don't want to, jump to any conclusions. We'll watch the tape. We'll do this. Translation, it was a really neat story. I'm happy for him. I saw where this guy was last year. Love what the distance and ground he covered in this shorter period of time. Remember, we dropped this dude in 2 weeks ago, and he had to pick up the offense from Bobby Ingram, and he's worked his tail off to even be in the position that he's in right now. But doesn't mean that we're going to put him on the roster. So it was a nice cold splash of water on the face, because it was easy to get sucked into that tractor beam yesterday of, Martavis Bryant looked good. He's big. He can offer us, this red zone ability that we've been looking for. Yeah, sign me up. Guy can, run still, draw pass interference penalties down the field. Hell yeah, sign me up. And Dan Quinn's like, whoa. Hold your horses there. All right. Yeah, we liked what we saw tonight, but do we love all of the things he brings to the table enough for that to take the place of a guy that also plays special teams and can help us in other? Because again, Martavis Bryant, understand that if you put him on the roster, how often is he going to be on the field to help you? In order to use him in the red zone, you have to first get in the red zone, right? And then secondly, who you taking off the field to put him on the field? Now, again, not like we got all these dynamic receivers and, who are you going to take off the field? So I get that. But at the same time, I said all of that to say this. How often is he going to be on the field? What is the usage that you're going to get out of him? If you're lucky, he plays 12 snaps out of 72 in a game. Is that more important than a guy that's on 3 or 4 special teams that's going to play 22 snaps every game? Because again, it varies as to how many times we get in the red zone or how many times they decide they want to take a shot to him and put him in the game. You don't want to give tells. So you can't have the Martavis Bryant package where, all right, we're going to take a shot with 88 in the game. Because teams then know, okay, they like to take a shot when they put this guy in the game, or they like to run this play, or they like to run this, screen to his side, or this, that, and the third. So you don't want to have tells, right? So there's a lot that goes into it. So he talked about all of that. He talked about the big picture of the roster to DQ. And he said, we got the number 2 waiver claim. We never want to be this high again, he said. He said, we have up to and even past week 1 to make roster alterations because, with and this is the thing I was talking about with the veterans. When you have a veteran, his contract is fully guaranteed if he's on the roster by week 1. So once week 1 starts. So if you don't want to pay a guy like Jamison Crowder, who you signed to a 1-year deal for probably let's call it $2 million. I don't know what his exact deal was. But if you don't want to pay Jamison Crowder $2 million, then he can't be on the roster week 1, right? So I could see them saying Jamison can't be on the roster week 1, but week 2, we feel some type of way about what we got out of Olamide Zaccheaus on punt returns, or he's too valuable as a receiver to have back there on punt returns, and so we need Crowder on the roster, then they can pull him up and make him an active roster member, right? But he won't be there come week 1, just off of the money aspect, if you ask me, the guaranteed side of that, right? So he talked about that, and he talked about, Adam Peters is going to be very vigilant of who's being cut and what moves can we make to upgrade our roster. So he's like, Adam Peters is watching film as we speak right now, right? So I said, okay, I hear you loud and clear, right? He talked about Fedarian Mathis and John Ridgeway, but Mathis in particular, and then he mentioned Ridgeway in passing as well as 2 guys that stood out in the game. And I'm glad he gave them a nice cold one because they deserved it, because both of those dudes, and I told you there were 3 standouts, KJ Henry, Fedarian Mathis, and John Ridgeway. He said, now, so this is what made me think that these dudes were on the bubble and still very well may be on the bubble. He said, we sat Fedarian down and we also talked to some of those defensive tackles and told them exactly what we were looking for from them and what we needed, and they went out and they delivered. And it looked like they told Mathis, we need quickness from you, because they love quickness up front. They don't like the big space-eating, sluggish, slow-moving, slow-footed guys on the defensive line. They want all of their defensive linemen agile, mobile, and hostile, getting up the field as one-gap penetrators. They're not looking for guys to be two-gapping, to be space eaters, they want them to keep the linebackers clean, but they're more like, hey, just go make a play. Go make a play, right? And so I saw that from Mathis. It's almost like a light bulb came off where he just said, all right, y'all want me to get up the field? Fine, that's what I'm going to do. I'm just going to blow shit up. And that's what he was doing in that whole Patriots game. Just blowing shit up and just being disruptive, right? So, I think it was Ben Standing who asked DQ if the guys didn't play in this game and they weren't injured, does that mean that they're pretty much on the roster? And it took DQ a little while to process what he was asking. And DQ was like, well, you're trying to make me go through all, because there were 35 guys who were inactive. So, and some of those guys like Sam Hartman, not making the team, but he just wasn't healthy enough to play, right? So not everybody is under that umbrella, but he was like, outside of the guys that were actually injured, if you were fully healthy and you didn't play, you're probably barking up the right tree. So that then makes me rethink my whole Trent Scott, because he didn't play at all. He wasn't dressed. Now, if I'm not mistaken, I think Jamison Crowder was dressed. He just didn't play. But even Crowder didn't play. So it makes me think, but I told you, I don't think just because you don't dress in that final, I've seen guys not dress, assume that they were on the roster, only for me to find out 48 hours later that their ass got cut. So not always can you assume, but I think most of those guys are going to make the roster for sure. And then he talked about Jamin Davis. And I told you the only thing that could surprise me at this point is if Jamin Davis was not on this roster when the 53 was finalized. That's the only thing that could surprise me. The only thing that would make my jaw drop is they cut Jamin Davis. They've asked a lot of him. He's delivered on everything that they've asked from him. He still holds value as a linebacker, off the ball. He can rush. I think Quinn talked about the first thing that attracted him to Jamin Davis was we looked at him and said, oh, this guy can be a great blitzer, which we've been asking Jack Del Rio to do for the past 2 seasons, like blitz Jamin Davis more. So he's like, first thing we wanted to do when we got our hands on him was we wanted to blitz him. And then we just saw how tall, long and strong and fast and explosive he was. And we were like, yo, we could do so much more than just blitz this dude. So that's what prompted them to want to use him as an edge rusher. And he's like, this dude's worked tirelessly trying to improve in that department. He's done everything we've asked. And so we've got a multitude of ways that we can deploy Jamin Davis. And so we're really pleased with the progress he's made at defensive end. And we're going to continue to, push him there as well as, playing him off the ball. So it reinforces that Jamin Davis is on this roster. But there was one point in the offseason in training camp where we started to doubt, is Jamin Davis on this roster? A lot of people were putting out videos. I might have even thought to myself at one point, like, damn, they're not using Jamin Davis at linebacker at all. And it got back to Dan Quinn, and he was like, yo, chill. We still using him as an off-the-ball linebacker too. And after that, I was like, okay, he's definitely on the roster. So that was DQ's presser in a nutshell. I thought that the most impactful thing he said was with Martavis Bryant, like, hey, let's not get too carried away. It was a nice story. He had a nice second half. Great to see it, but let's not get carried away. That's essentially what DQ said without saying it. So let's get to the Josh Harris presser from yesterday. So again, not a lot of this is earth-shattering or, game-changing information of any sort, but still worth mentioning. So he talked about still trying to find a new home. He's like, a lot of what we're doing right now is kind of, waiting on Congress, the Senate, things of that nature. He said nothing's really going to happen until this election. And then he said after the election, you get that lame duck period of whoever's in the office just playing out the string. Well, we know Biden ain't going to be back regardless of what happens. So he's like, it's going to be a lame duck period there from when the election takes place in early November to whenever they are able to tally up all the votes and declare a new president. The new president isn't sworn in until January. So there's that roughly 2-month period of the rest of November and all of December to try to get this RFK thing settled. And he's like, that's going to be the target date, because once the Senate changes over and we get new, people in there, you just don't know how the hell the bill is going to be received. While you got the Democrats still in there, they're going to try to pass that thing through, right? So we're going to see, right? So he said, we still don't really have a home, but the DMV, all, 3 of the states are in play, but we don't have a home yet. But then this was the first time I heard about this. And maybe I just haven't been following that closely because honestly, I just want to win and all that other stuff will take care of itself. 2030 is the date that people have thrown out, like almost a unofficial, official deadline for them to get some shit done. Like, hey, all right, we need to be breaking ground on a new stadium we at the city or state, wherever we putting a new stadium in a new facility, all that stuff. We need to already have that decided by 2030. What's going on? And he's like, that's a reasonable target. Like, I can't tell you that we're gonna hit it, but 2030 is 6 years away, and that's not unreasonable. It's not unreasonable to think that we should have a plan in place and be moving forward with the process by 2030. We'll see. Improvements to the current stadium. So Commanders, what is it? Commanders Field, right? Not Commanders Stadium. Which is it? It's Commanders Field, right? I'm going to have to get this right. I believe it's Commanders Field. So, I don't know if you guys are following, all of the improvements, but apparently there was a tour given to the members of the media. And like, I know Ben Standing had a thread where he was showing a lot of the improvements that they were seeing on the tour. And it looked nice. If you've ever been to FedEx, it's a dump. So to see some of the improvements now, I'm not gonna hold you. A lot of the improvements were to the people that are paying the most money, which you're supposed to take care of your high-paying customers. You want to take care of all of your customers, which they're doing in different ways. The concession is better. They've upgraded it and made it a lot more seamless. They've got better options to eat. It's better priced. So they're taking care of everybody that's come to the games, but they're really taking care of, these different clubs that they have. The 1932 club, and I forgot the name of the other club that they have. But they're taking care of all of these. They got different booths, and they've redone a lot of that stuff. We saw on the Commander's log a lot of the improvements that they're trying to make to the war room and inside the facility, and all the things that they're doing, and the lounge for the players and the cafeteria. So look, we heard about the $40 million that they were investing into, Commander's Field. You're starting to see it now. So that's a good thing, right? He talked about Jaden Daniels and being a QB and what that means, and what he's seen from him, and that he's pleased with the development, and him as a player, but more importantly him as a person, and all of that good stuff. So he talked about that. He talked about looking for the next team president, and I had forgot that quick, because a lot of that off the field shit doesn't really resonate with me when it's football time. We get into the off season and everything's starting to slow down. Then you can kind of inundate me with all of that, front office, team president, pick pants and picnic shit, and I'll give you some time. Right? During this time of the year, I ain't paying attention to none of that shit. They could pick a team president tomorrow, and I'm going to be talking about the 53-man roster, right? I might give you a throwaway line or two about the new team president, but I'm going to be focused on the 53-man roster. That's just where my head is. So he's like, yeah, I'm looking for a new team president as we speak. And I was like, oh shit, I forgot y'all moving on from Jason Wright after the year. So yeah, that's something else he said that he's leading the charge on right now. They asked him about the Sean Taylor statue that they're supposed to be building for him. And he said, I talked to his family. I know how important Sean Taylor is to this community, to this franchise. And I just felt this was some serious shade right here. And I loved it. He said, I just felt like his family and the fan base deserved a first-class memorial and exhibit. He said, what we want to do is we want to take care of the players that have made this organization a storied franchise over the years. He's like, look, we won a lot back in the day. And you see what they're doing with Darryl Green, and how they've welcomed a lot of the alumni back into the building, like John Riggins, who did not feel comfortable coming here. Champ Bailey did not feel comfortable coming here. A lot of guys did not want to be here because of Dan Snyder. Now those guys are welcome back in. Arms are wide open. And He's like, we got to do better. And I'm glad that they're redoing this because they botched this so poorly the first time. It was bad. I think most of the fan base turned on Jason Wright at that moment because they said, you got your fingerprints all over this shit. Somebody needed to be the voice of reason in there. And we're looking at you because they throwing your ass out there and you are in front of this project and you're okay in this, then you got to take the fall for this. He talked about this before. He talked about it again, having an obligation to the city, the people, the fans, etc., to restore this fan base or this franchise back to glory. So he talked about that, how important it is to him. This isn't just another franchise that he's invested in. This is the franchise. This is the one he grew up rooting for the most. So he's like, no, this is my mission to do this. He talked about building a state-of-the-art stadium and facilities. He's like, you know, what's been really eye-opening for him is visiting all of these different facilities. Like they went to Baltimore last year for the joint practice and he was like blown away because that shit was first rate, first class. So, you know, you take notes. They went to, he said he'd been to the one in Vegas. He's been to England, to the Tottenham stadium where they play the games, some of the games in the damn, what is it called? Something series. I forgot that damn quick. But the overseas games that they play. And then international series, that's what it's called. So and he talked about, you know, going to the LA stadiums, which are pretty much brand new, and, you know, just kind of trying to get a bunch of different ideas from all of these. He's like talking about, you know, Wi-Fi inside, you know, all that stuff is really been upgraded. You know, now it's a whole different ball game since, you know, he's been a part of a new stadium being built for any of his organizations. So he's like, it's a lot that goes into this, a lot of information that you're taking in, but he said, you know, when we finally do it, it's gonna be big. So he talked about being focused right now on consistency and winning. When in this, it was this answer right here where I just started laughing because Josh Harris is literally one of us, just with a whole hell of a lot more money. Okay, this dude is a fan, like. And it's a good thing. It's not like a bad thing where he's overbearing a fan and to the point where he wants to have control over every single aspect of the team, similar to Dan Snyder. Because remember, Snyder was a fan too. His problem was he wanted to have control over every minute detail of the organization instead of hiring people and letting them do their job, which is exactly what Josh Harris said. All I do is I try to hire brilliant people, some of the best minds in the business. And of course, I'm going to ask questions. And, you know, I want to know what's going on, but I'm not going to ever tell anybody how to do their job. That's why I hired them. So he said, right now, I'm trying to win. He's like, we can't be as bad as we were last year, right? He went totally out of owner mode and he tapped into his fandom. And he's like, yo, last year was terrible. We can't be that bad. We're going to win more games than we won last year. And then he snapped out of it, and then he went back into his professional mode, like, oh yeah. But you know, I love what we've done here. And for about a good 30 to 45 seconds, he was rambling like a fan. It was fun. I enjoyed it. I appreciated it because we're not gonna be as bad as we were last year. It was horrible last year. And it's crazy that the first year that he was here and got to watch the team, he was exposed to some of the worst football we've ever played as an organization. Like, there were times last year where you just went, I don't even want to watch this shit, man. Like, I know we finna lose by 30-something points. I don't even want to. When we played the Dolphins, I didn't even want to. I was so ready for the bye week. Remember that Dolphins game? It was right after the Cowboys ass whooping, which was insufferable. And then you knew the Dolphins was going to put up 40 on us and we weren't going to be competitive. And you're like, damn, can we just get to the bye week? I don't even remember we were saying last year how it just felt good to not have to watch us play during that bye week. It was so bad, right? And we didn't even want to watch. So I needed that break in week 14 last year. I can't speak for you. I needed a break. It was so bad last year. I was at the store for the entire first half of the 49ers game. I never do that. I'm always in front of my television, locked in. No matter how bad it gets, I'm usually front and center, locked in, watching the fellas. I was shopping. I was out buying stuff to get on the grill on a Sunday. I got the game on my cell phone. I'm walking through the store watching, but like that's not how I move. But that's the mindset that I had last year. It was bad. It's real bad. So he said the focus is on consistency, building a consistent winner, and winning. He's like, I'm trying to win championships. I'm trying to get to a place where we're not only making the playoffs. He's like, my other franchises, we're at the point now where the regular season is insignificant. Now, nothing's insignificant about the regular season because you got to get through the regular season to get to the postseason. But it's all like certain teams, you just get to a point where it's all about the postseason. Like Jerry Jones said that. He's like, we don't care about the regular season. It's all about the postseason for us. And, you know, when you've done what the Cowboys have done the last 3 years, 12 wins each of the last 3 years, that's what it's about. Hey, we got to win in the playoffs. And that's where Josh Harris is trying to get us to a point where we ain't even thinking about, you think like Bills fans, I think they got humbled a little bit last year because they almost missed the playoffs. But, you know, during the Patriots run, you think they were thinking about the regular season? Yeah, right. You think the 49ers fans are thinking about, man, I hope we win 10, 11. No, they like, bro, win 12, 13 games, win the division. Let's go win a Super Bowl, man. It's Super Bowl or bust. Like, that's where you want to be as a family. You think the Chiefs are worried about, oh, man, I hope we win enough games to make it to the playoffs? Hell no. They're like, after playoffs, we trying to get the 1 seed, get the first round bye, get everybody having to come through Arrowhead, and we trying to win another chip, 3 in a row, right? Ultimately, that's where you want to be, right? This was interesting. He talked about DC hosting an NFL draft. He said that's going to happen. You know, I've talked to the league about it already, and he said they're just so far out into the future. Like they plan things out so far that, you know, we could get awarded the 2038 draft, but okay, it's 2038. Who the hell's thinking about that shit in 2024, right? I always laugh when college football, when they announce, you know, a rivalry game, like Notre Dame is going to play Michigan in a home and home in 2034 and 2035. And I'm like, are you talking about some shit that's going to happen in 11 years from now? The hell am I supposed to do with that information? Good. That's great. You know, be looking forward to playing Michigan a decade from now for 2 straight years. That's nice. Like, what the hell am I supposed to do with that shit? You know? So he's like, we're going to try to get the draft here. That would be pretty dope. I would go to the draft if they have it in DC. I'd like to experience that. That would be pretty dope. He talked about training camp and having it on location versus going elsewhere. And he said DQ has made it known that he would prefer to take the team and have training camp elsewhere. And it makes sense when you think about DQ's mentality of brotherhood and wanting to build a bond. How do you build a bond the best in the summer? By going away and stripping down all of the, you know, barriers that stop guys from getting to know one another. It's easy to not know who your teammates are when I can just go home after practice. When you got to go back to the room and you have no choice but to be around guys, you have no choice but to form a bond in a brotherhood. So DQ wants to go, and he said they're exploring options right now to see when they can do that. And then the last two are, I think, reoccurring things that come up that I really don't think there's going to be an answer that's satisfactory, especially this one. with the name discussion. He brought up, wanting to galvanize the fan base versus separating them. And he's like, the name, it's a divisive force. And right now, and he said this a number of times, so it's not like he's switched up how he's felt about this. He talked about wanting to win. Like, the first thing you need to do if you want to get people back on board is you need to win. Truer words have never been spoken. We've seen this fan base come together when this team has been good. It just doesn't happen very often. So there's not a lot of evidence of that here recently in the last 2 decades. But can I say this? I meant to say this at the top of the show. Didn't it feel good to be on Sunday Night Football? Like, we're not going to be up there the rest of the season. So it was good for them to just throw us a little bone. You know what else felt good? And this is some bitch ass shit to say. I feel like a band right now for saying this. But because this goes against every, competitive bone in my body. This is some real skittish shit that I'm about to say, but it felt good to be on Sunday night with nothing on the line, right? It just felt good because normally I'm a nervous wreck. I don't get to enjoy these primetime games because I just don't want them to embarrass us, right? I thought we were past that last year, and then the Bears came to town and changed everything. It took me right back. You know how if you have childhood trauma and something happened to you when you were 8, and then you do all of this shit to try to put it in the past, but then that same, it's called a trigger. You have that one thing that happens that sends you right back to when you were 8, when that shit happened to you. That's what that Bears game was for me last year. Like, we had done a really good job of showing well on primetime. We beat the Eagles. We beat the Steelers. We were competitive in games on primetime television for the most part throughout Ronald's tenure. There were some ass whoopings in there. There was the Dallas game, 56-14. But that season was over. COVID had destroyed that season for us. So there was a built-in excuse. But for the most part, when we were on primetime television, we performed well enough to where I said, I don't even have... Look, the Bears game the year before was ugly, but we won. Right? Like, I'm not telling you these things were works of art, but we had come a long way from being embarrassed and begging the team to just not embarrass us. Forget about winning. Just don't embarrass me tonight. And then the Bears game last year happened, and I went right back to, hey, just don't embarrass me. And then what did we do on Thanksgiving? We got embarrassed, right? And so it just fostered this whole belief of, hey, I don't even want to be on primetime, bro. Let me get my ass whooping in obscurity at 1:00 while everybody else is watching their games and nobody's paying attention. So to hear him talk, to see us on Sunday night, enjoy Mike Tirico, and I'm not the biggest Chris Collinsworth fan, but he was good last night. And to just soak that up, he was talking good about Jaden, how he thinks he's going to be a superstar. And, you're talking about, hey, look, this defense can't be any worse than it was last year. Worst defense. I actually think this defense is going to be good because I think the defense is going to be good. And, it was good to just enjoy the game last night in that environment. Sunday night, it felt nice because I know we're not getting it again this season, nor should we, by the way. Anyway, I digress. I know I went off on a tangent right there. So he basically said with the name, we need to win. That's number one. And then we need to have things that will galvanize the fan base. The name isn't one of them right now. We need more things that bring us together first, and then we can start discussing a new name, because he's like, look, let me just start by saying this. The old name can never come back. For those of you that thought that there was a chance, the old name can never come back. Never. Some of y'all don't want to hear that, but that's the honest to God truth. It'll never come back. Can't. So now you got to figure out where to go from there. And I think understands Commanders isn't it. But, and I've said this, and I haven't moved off of this spot, they're going to change the name eventually. I do believe that. But the first order of business is to come in here and change the mindset of the fan base and the way people view this organization. And the way you do that is by investing resources into the product, which he's currently doing, and to win, right? Get this thing turned around, get the right people. So investing resources, that extends to not just money, right? But also investing resources into hiring the right people, which they've done with Peters and Quinn and his entire staff. And then you go from there, right? And then you start to find a way to turn all of these negatives into positives. That's going to get people back in the building. That's going to get people back on your side. And now we can start having a real conversation about changing the name. You're invested now. So he's like, you know, we got other things that are more pressing, like the stadium, like winning games that we're more focused on right now. But eventually, he didn't say eventually we'll get around to the name. But he kind of insinuated that, like, eventually it's the elephant in the room that we're gonna have to address. But right now, let's just worry about winning some football games, man. We'll figure out the rest of that shit later. And then lastly, he talked about waking the sleeping giant. I remember there was a guy here that Snyder had hired a while back that I want to say he was like a team president or some shit. And he was only here for like 6 months. And he called us a sleeping giant. And Bruce Allen and Dan Snyder did not like that shit. And he was fired maybe a month later after saying that shit. But whatever the case may be, it's true. We are a sleeping giant. It was just funny. The Cowboys had their evaluation, I think it was maybe a month ago or so. Everybody was going crazy almost over how much the Cowboys are worth if they were to sell, which they're not going to, obviously. But it's crazy to see how much they're worth now and how far we've fallen. Because if you look at, and I forgot where I saw this. I don't know if it was JP Finley's page or somebody had a page where they showed the evaluations of the NFL teams over the years. And I think it was from like the 70s all the way through. And we were number one and at a point in the 90s, it wasn't even close. We were number one, and we were head and shoulders above any other NFL organization. We were worth the most money. We were the most respected. As I told you guys, a lot of y'all will find this hard to believe, but during the Patriots dynastic run, that's what we were and how they were viewed, even though a lot of people viewed them as cheaters. And you also had to associate and attach winner to their to whatever you were saying about them, because that's all they did was win. And that's how we were viewed, as the smartest team in the league, most well-run. And all the way up until 2005, we were number one in the NFL in evaluation in terms of how much the organization was worth. And then Dallas snuck up, and then it started to go back and forth between us and Dallas from like 06 to like 2013 or so. And then after that, we fell off a cliff. That Shanahan, Robert Griffin III saga in 2013, that shit drained the organization and the fan base. And after that, we really realized, like, we're ass. And we may never get out of this shit because of Dan Snyder. And we just took a nosedive after that. Then, you get the whole name shit. And that probably put you at rock bottom. The one thing that people could hold on to was being the Redskins. It's what I grew up with. This is all I know. You snatch that identity from people, and then, yeah, it got rough. And so he's like, look, at the end of the day, we want to restore what it means to be a fan of this organization. And it's a sleeping giant, because until we start winning games, until we are taken seriously, teams are going to still come in here and their fan base is going to come in here and take up a portion of the stadium. It never used to be that way. Never. Right? I mean, I know it was a preseason game. And so I don't want to, be crazy, but there were a lot of Patriots fans at the game last night. I can't say that I saw it like on the screen. I could hear it though. When they would do something, I heard way more cheers than I should at a preseason game for the Patriots. Now I get it. It's a hop, skip, and jump. They right up the street. I get it. You're a Patriots fan. You know you're not going to be able to get to a bunch of games. It's relatively cheap to get in the building in a preseason game. I'll make the trip down, bring my kid, let him experience an NFL game. But it was a lot. It sounded like an awfully lot of Patriots fans. And I get it. It's a preseason game. And I really believe that if they win week 1 at Tampa, week 2 versus the Giants could be lit in the stadium. But you best believe it's still going to be a ton of Giants fans in there making that trek down from Jersey and New York to see to see Big Blue. And at some point, I want to be able to close their asses out of the stadium. They're always going to be giant. Just like when we go places, we're going to sneak in there. We're going to get in there. But it ain't enough for us to take over nobody's damn stadium. Giants have come in and taken over FedEx. Eagles fans have come in and take over FedEx. Dallas Cowboys fans always come in and take over FedEx. At some point, I want to get it to where, yeah, it's a little, sliver of Cowboy fans in here, but they ain't got shit on us. Anyway. I digress. Let's get to the comment section. LT, thank you for the super chat. Great. Oh, you know what? LT, I'm going to read this super, then I'm going to get to a couple of things that I talked about on the podcast. Then we'll get to the comment section. Let me knock this one out. Because he ain't talking about nothing but some Eagle shit anyway, right? Let's just get this out the way. LT, thank you for the super chat. Greatly appreciate you. My guy, LT, writes, Jahan's prime will be in Philly the next 3 years. If his prime is in the next 3 years, then he's not a good football player. Because Jahan is in the infant stages of his career. You should not be going through your prime in your rookie contract. You should be hitting your prime in your rookie contract at some point. And you might get to, like Justin Jefferson, I still don't think is at his prime, his peak. And we've seen the numbers he's posted in his career already to start. We've never seen anything like it to start an NFL career from a wide receiver before. And I still think there are levels that he can reach that he hasn't gotten to yet. Now, he's going to need a quarterback to help him get there. And I don't know if he's going to have that for the next 2, maybe even 3 seasons. But I said all of that to say, if Jahan's prime is the next 3 years, then he wasn't worth a first-round pick to begin with. He just needs to establish himself as a legitimate former first-round pick wide receiver, and maybe he can do that in Philadelphia. Maybe he can do that. We'll see. Let's get to some things that I talked about on my podcast earlier today before we get to the comment section. So I brought Tim Patrick up yesterday during the post-game show, and I told you guys that he's a player that I'd be interested in. I had watched the Broncos preseason game earlier in the day, which is why I could mention that I thought Tim Patrick might be available, because I'd watched the Broncos play against the Arizona Cardinals, and it was a Broncos broadcast, so they were talking a lot about the Denver Broncos and how many guys they had available and how some of those guys weren't going to make the roster. And Patrick was one of those names, although he's a fan favorite and a teammate favorite. Sean Payton didn't draft him, and he's been out for 2 years due to injuries. And so at this point, he's expendable with all the talent that the Broncos now feel like they have at receiver. So now, reportedly, and I'm going to read you what Ari tweeted out. A surprise. The Broncos are expected to move on from wide receiver Tim Patrick and are looking at trade possibilities per Mike Hillis, 9 News. Patrick had a great preseason and is returning from back-to-back years of significant injuries. Didn't expect that. Well, I did expect that. I didn't expect him to garner a ton of activity in the trade market, however. Now, I don't know if they're going to find a trade partner, because this is the thing. When we know you're going to release someone, you hold little to no leverage. The only thing, that gives you any sort of leverage in a situation that the Broncos find themselves in is if there's a team that desperately wants Tim Patrick and they know that they're not going to get him because of where they sit. Let's say the Ravens say, man, we could use a Tim Patrick, a big body receiver that can go up and get the ball for Lamar. You know, he loves throwing to tight ends and bigger targets. Patrick would be perfect for us. Well, you're not going to get Tim Patrick. You're 30th in the waiver claim if you're the Ravens. You were in the AFC Championship game last year. You're not getting Tim Patrick. So if you're the Ravens, you say, hey, I'll give you a 6th-round pick for him. Denver's like, hell yes, deal, right? But you got to have someone that's willing to say, you know what? I want this guy. Most teams are like, oh, no. You're going to release him. I'll just wait and see what happens. You'll release him. So if I'm Washington, I'm very interested in Tim Patrick, but I am not giving you a damn thing for him. I'm sitting here at 2nd in the waiver claim. So by no means am I willing. The only reason I was willing to give up anything for the kicker, and I've already expressed this, is because we wanted to get him in a game. And the only way to do that was to trade for him and get him into Washington before Sunday. That's why they did it. Now that that's come and gone, I ain't giving you a goddamn thing. I ain't giving you nothing. So release him or find a trade partner. I don't care. If you release him, I'll put my waiver claim in and I'll see what happens. But I'm not giving you anything for him. Same can be said for anybody else that's out there. Unless there's some unique set of circumstances that arises where you go, man, I did not expect this guy to become available. This guy we feel like is really good. And if he were a free agent, we would sign him to a multi-year deal. Unless something like that comes up, I'm not giving anybody any draft picks. Not a single one. We're sitting 2nd. And as Dan Quinn said, we don't want to be here again. But we're here now. Take advantage of it. Other roster cuts that are notable. This is also from Ari. And let me just look to see if any have happened since we've been up here, because I got his little his roster cut thread up on my screen. So let me just make sure there are no more names kind of jump off the screen at me that have been cut by other teams. I also saw that the Broncos are going to try to trade Samaj P. Ryan. Good luck with that. I don't know who's giving you anything for Samaj P. Ryan. Just go ahead and cut him, bro. I told you the Commanders are one of 3 teams who have not cut anybody. Make it 4. Carolina has not cut a single player yet. Green Bay or Houston haven't cut a player yet. 5, 6. The Raiders and the Chargers have not cut a player yet. So maybe it's not the Saints haven't cut a player, but the Saints, all the teams that played yesterday, I get it. The Saints played yesterday. The Titans played yesterday. The Commanders played yesterday. The Patriots played yesterday. The Broncos played yesterday. The Cardinals played yesterday. I get those teams. And still, the Patriots have already cut guys. The Cardinals have already cut guys. Hey, our old friend, William Bradley King. Didn't even know he was in New England. He got cut. Yeah, I don't see anything here that would move the needle for us per se. Bucks cut a lot of guys already, the most in the league. Yeah, I don't see anybody that moves the needle. So anyway, go through this list real quick. Bucks released wide receiver Sterling Shepard, former Giant. I thought his career was over last year. So I was shocked that he even got a sniff with the Bucks, but they cut him. His career's probably over. Lions wide receiver, former wide receiver Donovan Peoples-Jones. That one was the one that jumped out at me. But my guy MCGB, who is a massive Lions fan, on my podcast said that he really struggled, like mightily struggled, because remember, they traded for Donovan Peoples-Jones. Like, he was supposed to be a part of their mix. And for them to cut him a year later tells you that they were definitely not pleased with what they got out of him. MCGB said he was lining up in the wrong positions. He was struggling to grasp the playbook. He was truly a non-factor. So again, take it for what it's worth. Sometimes a change of scenery does you some good, but that's tough that he wasn't able to pick up the offense and things of that nature. Russell Gage was a name that somebody in our fan base threw out not too long ago, saying that there's history between Gage and Dan Quinn from Gage's Atlanta Falcons days. He's also been with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. I'm good on Russell Gage. He's not enough of a needle mover for me personally. Matt Corral, Damian Wilson from the Cowboys, and then Matt Breida at running back. So I'm really only interested in receivers and edge rushers right now. If a corner of note rears its ugly head, I'd be interested. But really, it's those two positions in particular that I'm like, hey, what you got? Nothing? Okay, I'm good. He's like, hey, I got this linebacker. No, I'm good. I'm good. Appreciate it. You know how you be walking through the mall and they trying to clean your shoes, or they trying to get you to try these skincare products. You like, nah, I'm good, bro. I'm good. And they persistent too. Nah, I'm good. Hey, bro, I'm telling you, I got these tight ends. I'm good, bro. I'm good. I'm good. I appreciate it though. I hit him with that real quick. Oh no, I'm good, man. I appreciate it though. And keep on walking. Christopher McLaughlin, my guy Chris. Thank you for the super chat. Greatly appreciate you. Thank you for being a member of the MOBB. My guy Chris Mack. Thank you for your generosity as always. Writes, hey Lou, what's up, Chris? Hope all is well with you and the family. Likewise, as always. About time to start vacation. Question: how many times has the team finished the season scoring more than 400 total points in this century? Once is 2012. Offense needs work at tackle and wide receiver. So how many times this century, so since the start of the century, 2000, has this team scored? Okay, so they definitely did it in 99. Oh, shit, that's 99. I literally just said since 2000. Oh, golly. 400 points. All right, so I would say twice, maybe? I would say twice. We had some big games in 05, but we also had, man, 05, we might have done it, though. We had some big games. I think we beat San Francisco 52-17. And that's the last time we scored 50, coincidentally enough. I mean, you're talking 400. That's 50 points right there in one game. Was the Santana Moss game against Jacksonville in 05, the overtime game where he caught the touchdown and broke the tackle and ran? If that's 05, I'm saying 05 because that was a 36-point game right there. That was a 30-30 overtime game. Tanneman scores the touchdown. We win 36-30. Then we beat the Cowboys in 05, 31-7. That was the Cooley 3-touchdown game in the first half. So I'm going to say 05. 15, we had some big games in 15. Beat up on the Saints in 15. Outdueled Aaron Rodgers in that was in 16. Outdueling Aaron Rodgers was in 16. 2015. You had the comeback. You had the Code Red game against Tampa. That's a 30-piece. Boy, we had some stinkers that year too, though. I don't know. I'm going to say twice, 05 and 2012. I wouldn't be shocked if 15 or 16 got in there too. And those are the only other two. 15 and 16, 05 and 12. Those are the only four. I'm going to say 3 out of those 4 are realistically possible. 15 or 16. We got off to a great start in 17. That was the year I think we played the Raiders on Sunday Night Football, beat them up pretty good. And then we went to Kansas City. They were undefeated and should have won that game. And then everybody got hurt in that game in the first half, and the season went down the toilet after that. So I don't think it's 17. So it's 15, 16, 5, and 12. And I'm going to take of the two, because it ain't both 15 and 16. I'm going to say we were more prolific of an offense in 16 than we were in 15. So I'm going to say 16, 12, and 5. Those are the 3. You think the offense needs work at tackle and wide receiver? I don't think you're wrong, but I just don't think you're gonna find if you find a tackle on the streets right now, you're all you're doing is getting another Cornelius Lucas, or a Trenton Scott. Like that's what you're bringing on board. Like you don't need another one of those. You don't need another Andrew Wiley. Like it's not gonna do you any good to go scavenging teams' rosters for a tackle. Receiver is different. Receiver is different. You either can or you can't play tackle at a high level. Christopher McLaughlin. My guy, Chris. Double up. Thank you for doubling up. Chris, once again, thank you for your generosity, man. I can't thank you enough for all of the support that you show me and the brand, man. I can't thank you enough. My guy, Chris. Excuse me. Right. Hey, Lou. What up, Chris? Warm it up, Chris. I'm about to warm it up, Chris. That's what I was gonna do. Says 4 questions. 1 and 2. Where do you see the new stadium being and why? And do you think the year 2030 is reasonable for us to have games there? So I don't know. So to answer the 2030 thing, I don't know if he was saying that they would be ready to, like the stadium would be built and we'd be ready to have games. I think he was saying 2030 is a reasonable time to expect them to have selected a location for the stadium and break ground and be ready to start building. I think that's what he was referring to when he said 2030. Not they'd be done. There's no way they don't have a stadium location picked, and it's not going to happen like now, or it could not happen until 2026 that they figure out where the stadium is going to be, right? Or 2027. Like we have no idea. Like they're going to, I think, find out sooner rather than later, but we're going to be at FedEx, which is why they're pouring money into it. We're going to be at FedEx for at least the next probably 8 years, I think. But it'd be great if they could have the stadium completed by 2030. I don't think that's what he meant, but you might be right. That might have been what he meant. Where do I see the new stadium being? Right where the hell it's at right now, in Landover, Maryland. Honestly, I don't think they're going to be able to get the support that they need to get it in the old RFK site. There's so many changes that have taken place since the last time that stadium was there. And the people, the constituents that are there, they don't want the stadium there. Like, we've heard that multiple times. They don't want the stadium there. The people that live there, they work for the government. They don't want the traffic that comes with the stadium. They don't want it there. So you'd have to clean up the downtown area because it's not the safest place. Which, if they were going to pour money into, they would clean up that area. I don't worry about that. But that's where it belongs. I don't think that's where it's going to ultimately be. I think they're going to end up having to build the stadium right next to where it is right now in the parking lot. And we'll be playing games there, and you can see the new stadium being built right next door. And I think that's ultimately where it's going to end up staying, to be honest. He says, 3, what do you want the new Commanders president, when hired, to work on? Same thing I said when the new ownership group came in here. Get us a new stadium. Hit the ground running on figuring out where it's going to be at, and then figure out, what it's going to look like, and start giving us some mock-ups. Like, I'm watching the Bears, and they're talking about their new stadium, and I got jealous watching their Hard Knocks. Like, shit, when we going to get our goddamn new stadium? And then 4, what 3 players do you want for sure on the practice squad? If they don't make, and this is assuming they don't make the roster. Correct? We're on the same page. So assuming they don't make the roster, first of all, I want Michael Wiley on the active roster, on the 53, but I don't think he's going to be there. So Wiley is definitely there. Martavis Bryant, if he's not on the roster, I'd like to see him there and them continue to work with him. And then it's a tie between Jeff Driscoll and Sam Hartman, because Sam Hartman is the future at the backup position for us. So you don't want anybody snatching him up. And then Jeff Driscoll would be the answer if anything happened to either one of our quarterbacks. He'd be the guy that you'd feel most comfortable going into an actual game. You're not ready for Sam Hartman to go into an NFL game. So those 2 are tied. But Wiley, want to see him continue to get opportunities. Martavis Bryant, if he's not on the active roster, and then the quarterbacks. CR7's the GOAT. Thank you for the super chat. Greatly appreciate you. Thank you for being a member of the MOBB, who writes, not to ruin the vibe, but I've been watching your account for years, since I was like 13, and I appreciate how you provide an escape from life's problems. That's really deep, and sometimes, I tell people sometimes I don't see myself as that or see this as that, but it can be. And I've experienced that, watching other people's contents and things of that nature. And, sometimes it is an escape. That's what football is, or just sports in general is. Like, when we didn't have it during COVID, it was tough because that's an escape. And that's what content provides for people sometimes. And I sometimes I don't view it that way, but it can be that way. And so I appreciate that you appreciate the content, and I just try to help in any way I can. I always tell you, my program is about the 3 E's. My brand is about the 3 E's, right? Educate, enlighten, and entertain. Like, I want to make you laugh and smile and have a good time. I'm also trying to drop some gems on your melon from time to time. And, every so often I can enlighten, right? And even when you enlighten somebody, it's not that you're, telling them how this is done or how that's done, or you're opening their minds to different possibilities and different outcomes. Maybe you're seeing something in a different way. You may not agree, because we don't always agree, but maybe me saying what I said makes you say, you know what? I still don't agree with you, but I see where you're coming from. That's where the enlightenment piece comes from. So I appreciate that, CR7 the GOAT, man. Why would you think that would ruin the vibe? It's not ruining any vibe. JD Sports Talk. Thank you for the super chat. Greatly appreciate you. JD writes, Louie, do you consider it a disappointment that Ricky Stromberg is not a starter yet? First 3 rounds in the draft, you want eventual starters, or is it okay? So Ricky Stromberg should never have been selected in the 3rd round. See, that's the problem with some of these picks. You put this title on them of where they were selected, and now there's an expectation that's followed with that. Ricky Stromberg should have been a 5th round pick. And if he was a 5th round pick, we wouldn't be having this discussion, right? But since he was taken in the 3rd round, now you look at him and you say he should be starting by now. And it's just not, it's not where he is. I actually thought he could have been good had he not gotten injured, but it is what it is. Just like Fedarian Mathis probably shouldn't have been drafted in the 2nd round. Even though I like what he's shown me, just hasn't been healthy. But he probably wasn't, Mayo Force probably shouldn't have been drafted in the 1st round. He probably should have been a 2nd round corner. But, when a guy gets drafted where they get drafted, the expectations are going to be placed on him, and that's just how it works. And you got to figure out a way to make it work. And no, I'm not disappointed that Stromberg's not, because I didn't trust Rivera and that group selecting players. So because they selected him in the 3rd round, I didn't say, well, he's a 3rd round center. I didn't like his pick because we had just signed Nick Gates. I hated that pick. You signed a guy in free agency. Why are you like, they overreacted to all of the issues we've had at center. We had 2 years straight of just pure hell at center with all the injuries and having to go out. So they overreacted. They signed a guy in free agency. They already had a guy on the roster that they had brought back. And then they went out and drafted a guy. Like, it was just too much. It was overkill. In the 3rd round, you could have drafted a guy in the 5th round if you were going to do that. Then they doubled down and drafted a guy in Braden Daniels in the 4th round that definitely wasn't a 4th round pick. So, yeah, no. I'm not disappointed. It's just like I'm more disappointed in the fact that Rivera wasted so many draft picks. When you look at his drafting history here in Washington, so many draft picks were wasted. That's what I'm disappointed in. The fact that you should be building a foundation around, we're still eating off of Jay Gruden guys, right? The Deron Paynes, the Jonathan Allens, the Terry Mc, we still eating off of Jay Gruden guys. We ain't eating off of Ron Rivera dudes. That's a damn shame. We still spending money from 88. We ain't got no new money, right? That's the difference. You still spending money from 88 because you ain't got no money from 2008. All we got is the money from 88. It's crazy. Once that shit run out, if this new group doesn't bring us some more bread, we broke. 16 double dot. Been a member for 36 months. First person to get the salute for 3 years of being a member. I want to say my guy Metaphor. I want to say Metaphor hit his anniversary not too long ago, if I'm not mistaken. But this is the first time I've seen it show up on my screen. 16 Devil Doc. Thank you for being a member for 36 months. Salute. Lou, hope you and the fam are doing well. Likewise. Been a minute, but still watching all of your content, brother. You're killing it. Hey, I don't think Dontrell Inman and Isaiah Wright are available to sign. Laugh at Hey, good one. Good one. Man, that was bad. 2020 was bad. We're not there. But you talk to some people, you would think we were back in 2020 with the likes of Dontrell Inman, AGG, and Isaiah Wright on the roster at receiver. We're not that desolate. It's not that bad. The cupboard's not that bare. But good gracious. Elrico Anderson. Good to hear from you, 16 Devil Dot. Elrico Anderson. Thank you for the super chat. Greatly appreciate you. Elrico writes, sup, Lou? Sup, Elrico? I believe we can replace Turner's special team production with one of the extra safeties that may stick on the 53-man roster. True. That's why I think he's a placeholder. I don't think he's a guy that'll actually be on the roster when the dust settles and the smoke clears. I think he'll be there initially when the roster comes out, but 2-3 days later, I think he'll be gone, right? But you're not wrong. You keep 7 safeties, it probably is at the expense of Cole Turner, right? If we keep him, we should have kept Dotson. Let's go C's. And yes, I'm coining it. LOL. Hey, I'm not mad at you. I just can't call them the C's because the C's mean the Celtics for me. But go ahead. Call them the C's till your heart is content. We'll see if they keep Turner or not. It wouldn't shock me if they don't. Like I told you, initially, when I first crafted my 53-man roster, my final one, I didn't have Turner or Martavis Bryant. I had 5 receivers and 3 tight ends. And then when I was done on the defensive side, I looked back and I was like, well, damn, I still got 2 open spots. So then I put Bryant back at receiver put him at receiver for 6, and I put Cole Turner at tight end for 4. And then I realized Jordan McGee probably is going to end up on the 53 to start before they make a decision on what they're going to do with him, whether it's IR, PUP, or whatever. And so he'll be on the initial 53. So then I had to add an extra defender, take one of the offensive guys off, and I took off Martavis Bryant and left Cole Turner. But we'll see. I don't think you're wrong necessarily. I don't think Cole Turner is going to make this roster, but I seen an increased physicality out of him. And Dan Quinn talked about guys pressing and not catching the football. He was talking about Cole Turner. He's talking about Cole Turner. And then Cole Turner made that catch. And I think they like his physicality. You know, he came a long way in that department. He's probably still got a long ways to go, but he's willing to put in the work. So we'll see. Money Shot 217. Thank you for the super chat. Greatly appreciate you. Who writes, also, most teams only keep 9 offensive linemen. No need for 2 guards and a center. And hearing D. Hampton is permanently moving the linebacker. Thoughts? I'm not shocked if he's moving the linebacker. That's how Dan Quinn likes him. That size. I told you when they drafted him, he was the perfect replacement for Jeremy Chin. Jeremy Chin's going to play a lot of linebacker, but he's still a safety because he can move away from the line of scrimmage. Hampton, they may have already identified him as a guy that plays better close to the line of scrimmage, so they're not going to ask him to move too far away. He was a strong safety at Washington, the University of Washington. So, you know, he does a lot of his damage down around the line of scrimmage. You don't want him running too far away from the line of scrimmage, but same body type as Jeremy Chin. So I told you he was like a Jeremy Chin clone. I think they have him working at linebacker because they have some needs at linebacker. Jordan McGee being injured puts you in a bit of a quandary. And even if he gets healthy, who's to say he doesn't re-aggravate something, right? You just want to be prepared. Obviously, the Anthony Pittman thing did not work out the way that they thought it was going to. So now you really don't have as many backers as you thought. So now you need somebody to go over there. And they're not cutting Dominique Hampton. So they're like, look, if he can't stick at safety right now, because we got so many of them, let's put him at linebacker. So whatever the case may be, they're not cutting that dude. I don't think, at least. So we'll see. As far as keeping 9 offensive linemen, you can keep 9 or 10. Teams keep 9 if they're really comfortable with their 9 guys. Because our offensive line isn't great, I think you keep 10. If you had a better offensive line, then you can keep 9, right? Is there a need? So the reason why I think it's still 10 is because where you would trim off the fat would be on the interior. But because I think, so the person that I think would be the odd man out if they did would be Julian Good-Jones. Because although I think he can play center, I don't think he's a really good center. I think he's really just a guard at this point. Can't play tackle. You're an okay center. Ricky Stromberg gives you both guard and center, and he's probably more naturally a center than he is a guard, but he can still play guard. So I think you want to have the ability to keep that flexibility at center and guard. Like Nick Allegretti can play center. And so you can move pieces around but you want to keep the offensive line intact as much as possible. So if you can just insert Michael Dieter, that's what you're going to do, right? But if you insert Michael Dieter at center and he was your first, center guard off the bench, you need another guy, right? So I think in doing that with Chris Paul playing tackle, he really saved them potentially a roster spot because you were going to have Trent Scott on the roster and he would have just been a tackle. Like he could play guard, but he's not a really good guard. So I don't know if they're going to keep 10 or not. I think 10 is the number just because you don't trust this offensive line. Brandon Coleman, what is his injury situation going to be moving forward? Like, I think you just need the protection of keeping the 10th offensive lineman, right? That's just my take on it. But yeah, you could keep 9. I would always advocate for 9 for less than more. But I used to do that in the past, and they would always keep a 10th offensive lineman. And it makes a lot of sense to do it when you're not sure about your offensive line, which we aren't, which we are not. Especially with Andrew Wiley dealing with some tightness throughout, camp, and then Coleman having the pec issue. It's just too many uncertainties to keep a number less than 10 to me. You just need the extra bodies. But we'll see what they decide to do. Stephen Taylor, thank you for the super chat. Greatly appreciate you. Thank you for being a member of the MOBB. My guy Steven writes, agree with the last super. Been around since early high school. Now I am an ODU alum. Got me through many nights. Keep killing it, Lou. Oh, fellow Monarch here. That's nice. That's crazy. It also makes me feel old, which I am getting old. You see the grays in the beard. I'm getting a little distinguished, but it's just crazy. You're like the 5th person that was like, yo, I started watching you when I was in high school. When I was 13, I'm like 25 now. And I'm like, shit. I've been doing that for this, but I've been doing it for that long. So yeah, it's crazy. But it's always cool to hear people be like, yeah, I was watching you since high school. I'm now out of college. I'm like, that's wild, but I appreciate that kind of support, man. That unwavering kind of support where no matter what the situation, because look, y'all could have quit me a long time. We've been trash for a long time. Like, it's easy to be like, bro, I'm out. I'll catch you when I catch you. I see you when I see you. But a lot of y'all kick it with the kid, even when we going through a season like last year where it was tough. It was tough. You had to laugh to stop from crying last year. It was bad. And y'all still stuck it out with me. Y'all still was here in these post games, and I told you a long time ago, it's going to make it that much sweeter when we finally get to where we're going. Because there were times where we didn't think we would ever get there. It just was a dream. We're going to get there. And when we do, we're going to be able to look back on those times, some of those ass whoopings, and we're going to laugh, right? Shit ain't funny right now, or at least not in the moment. We laugh about the Bears game now, but shit wasn't funny last year when shit happened. So I appreciate you, Steven, man. And best of luck to you in all of your future endeavors, and go Monarchs. Anyway, shout out to everybody that's been with the kid for going on a decade plus for some of y'all, man. Really, really appreciate y'all. But anyway, I digress. That's going to do it for me, your man Louie T, here on this installment of the Command Post. Y'all know what it is. Post up, take command. So tomorrow, I'm all over the place. I got a lot going on. I don't know if I'm coming or going tomorrow. But sometime tomorrow, and I can't tell you when. I don't know if it's going to be tomorrow night, if it's going to be tomorrow during the day. I'm aiming for tomorrow during the day because I have a lot going on tomorrow night. I want to get a podcast episode in after I watch Hard Knocks. I'm doing a show with Rio tomorrow on his channel, and so I want to get mine in. I got a Bleacher Report show at 4 soon as the rosters are finalized. I think it is at that moment after I get off that Bleacher Report stream that I'm coming straight to you guys and we're going to go live. I don't even know if I have time to do that though, because I'm supposed to be doing something else at a time that is not normal for me. And so there's that. And in order to prepare for that, I got to cut off time, so I don't know if I'm coming or going tomorrow. I'm going to figure it all out. Maybe I'll have to push the podcast to Wednesday. Because I got to get in front of y'all tomorrow. Because it's the 53-man roster is being finalized. We got to talk about it. So we'll figure it out. Anyway, I digress. Swaggy P, thank you for the super chat. Greatly appreciate you. Thank you for being a member of the MOBB. My guy, Swaggy P, writes, through the good and the bad times, we bleed burgundy and gold. Amen to that. Amen to that. I always get asked, why are you a fan of that team? I get asked that a lot. And my response is, I don't have a choice, man. I didn't choose this team. This team chose me. And I'm not saying that if I had to do over again, I would have chose a different path because they were good back then when I picked them or they picked me. They were really good. So I probably would have done the same thing. If you would have told me, hey, it's going to get pretty dark. You sure you want to do this? I probably still would have done it. I don't regret it. But boy, they made it tough for a number of years. They made it tough on us. Us diehards, they made it tough on us, man. They made it tough on us for sure. Anyway, I digress. Y'all get out of here. Enjoy the rest of your evening. I look forward to chopping it up with you guys tomorrow. They got a lot of work to do. They cut nobody today. So they're cutting 37 guys tomorrow. I guess we'll see what happens when they cut those guys. But anyway, I digress. Should be a pretty interesting day, to say the least. I'll see you at some point tomorrow. If the list comes out early enough, I may be, if we're done, if they're trimmed their roster down to 53 at 2 o'clock, at 2:30, I can jump on and we can go live then. But my guess is they're going to, this thing's going to go down to 3 something, and I just won't have enough time. So I'll probably have to do it later on in the evening. But we'll play by ear. We'll see how it goes. And if things go according to plan, you'll probably see me sooner rather than later. But anyway, I digress. You guys have a good one. Take care. God bless. Good night.